but for people may not have heard the term, I'll walk in, I'll tell Austin's story, which he told to me, which was, well, actually, I lived in a small town, and in a small town, everybody knows everybody's business. So when my dad told me, "You're hanging out with who?" Because before he died, Eldo Austin, and came back, was a notorious town asshole. And so when I met Austin, he said, "Yeah, the old guy," meaning the other guy who he used to be. The other guy, he was at the hospital running on the treadmill doing the stress test for your heart.
Yeah.
See how prone you'd be to a heart attack, and he had a fucking heart attack on the treadmill. That's how prone he was to a heart. So the machine really pushed him into it. He died. Massive heart attack, died. He said, "Yeah, he was on the table, and then I came in, and we tagged out, and I came into the body. I kind of scared some people when I came back to life again." And he said, "Yeah, his story was actually it was a multi-lifetime yarn actually that he told. He said the other guy was a reincarnation of a cavalry officer who had served in General Crook's army, exterminating the Apaches in the Southwest, and he said I was one of the people he exterminated."
Welcome to the Casual Temple. This week my guest is Ishtar Howell, who's a spiritual seeker, intuitive astrologer, meditation teacher, world traveler, and writer. After having a childhood that was highly connected to the world of spirit with Samadhi experiences about the nature of reality, at the age of 13, Ishtar was involved in a car accident that claimed the life of his beloved mother. He experienced what he later learned was a near-death experience, or NDE. That traumatic experience put him on a mystical path to becoming a teenage monk in his own home. Then at the age of 18, he discovered a meditation practice called Ishayas Ascension and became a member of an ashram devoted to that practice. These days, Ishtar is a talented intuitive astrologer and meditation teacher who leads workshops, classes, and retreats around the world. Ishtar, thank you for joining me today to discuss your amazing life journey.
Merrily, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Fun to be here.
Oh, good. Yeah, I'm glad. Yeah, we had a little bit of a pre-chat. Kind of a big fan of your interviews because you're just like a really great storyteller. And we had an astrology session together and it was amazing. And I've listened to that session at least 2 more times since then, because there's just a lot of unfolding that happens when you look at your astrology chart and get an intuitive insight from someone on it. So I'm really happy that you're here. Let's see. So we're just going to kick it off by kind of going having you talk about your earliest spiritual or paranormal experience and then kind of go from there.
Great question. Prompt. I like this show's format. I'm already having more fun than usual. Okay, first experience that I'll go with the paranormal. The first paranormal experience I remember occurred before I could walk and before the first time that I escaped out of my crib. So those were 2 very big watermark moments for me. So I was in crib. Those were the crib days, and I would wake up very early before the sun came up. That was my pattern. I would just kind of meditate without knowing I was meditating. I'd look at my curtains, and I'd wait, and then eventually the sun would come up, and my mom would come in the room. So one night in my sort of early morning, late night revelry, I was sitting there and a woman walked into my room. And this was not an unusual thing because sometimes my maternal grandmother would stay over, and my room was, being in the crib, there was a bed over there. My room was kind of the guest room. So the guests got to have a baby stare at them at night. And sometimes my aunt would sleep over there. So nothing different in my life. And I said, okay, new guest. Coming in the room, and I was looking at her, and she had puffy, curly hair that was white curly hair that was very similar to my maternal grandmother's hair, but she was much shorter than my maternal grandmother, and she had on this blue nightgown, like a pale blue nightgown with white lace, and she walked by, and I didn't feel any fear. She was glowing, which was unusual. She had a glow to her, and I noted that. I was like, well, I like that. This is a new thing. And she's kind of walking by, didn't look at me, but I felt her awareness touch mine, which was an interesting sensation
Mm.
for a kid, and was stronger than when the adults would do it. I felt myself being touched with a wave, and in that wave was also a decided sense that this being greatly approved of me, and so I felt very safe with this being. I felt this kind of, like just a warm embrace from this
Yeah.
being, even though they didn't turn their head to look at me, which is weird. They kind of kept going that way. And I watched them, and they walked out the back room of my bedroom, and I'd never seen anybody walk through a wall before at that point. And so I just noted that. It
Hmm.
wasn't frightening. I didn't have the word ghost. I didn't have words, probably. It was pre-linguistic. We were thinking in pictures or something else. And then it must have been 2-3 years later. I was down in the living room on the couch. My mother and I were looking through an old photo album. She turned the page. There was the woman in a picture in the same nightgown, uh, blue with the same patterning, and white collar with the same sort of lacing, same hair, same profile. All I saw was the sides. I kind of worked it out. And it turned out that was my great grandmother,
Mm.
my maternal great grandmother, who had died about 18 months before I was born. And my mother introduced her by saying, "This is your great grandmother, Laura. She really, you two really would have gotten along, uh, and that was the first paranormal experience, and probably the most pleasant of the ones that sort of followed in childhood."
Yeah, I have sort of a strange question.
Yeah,
What was the color? So you said your grandmother had a glow around her. Was there a color
yeah.
associated to that? And what
Blue
color?
silver.
Blue silver.
There was. Yeah,
Okay, that's
yeah,
interesting. The reason
yeah.
I'm asking is I tend to see, just kind of interjecting my, I tend to see when I do readings for people that there's little like dots that come in, like little
Mm,
pinpoints of light, and they have specific colors. And I've noticed with like maybe folks that have passed away or passed over, crossed over, they tend to either be gold or like this bluey silver color. So
mm,
it's just like just
mm.
storing that data.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that was very clear. I mean, blue silver is the most accurate. I mean, is there something between silver and pearl? Not really, but it kind of sort of, there is a bit
Right.
wiggle room there. I'm not great. I don't have a fine grained color recognition like an artist or anything like
Yeah.
that.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, thank you for sharing that first experience. I know we had chatted a little bit beforehand that you had kind of multiple experiences
Yeah.
as a child. Were there any others that you wanted to share and kind of talk about?
Yeah, actually, and this came later, but it was one of the more poignant ones. I'm just going to skip ahead to uh, the teen years. And it's connected to earlier stuff. So once when I was a little kid, God, I must have been. I had just watched. It was not long after I watched Labyrinth as a film, and so
Hmm.
we're talking 87, 88, or something like that, 89. I was about 5, 6, so now people know how old I am. uh, and I was I woke up one night with a start, and I was I was in a sort of a sleep paralysis, but sitting upright after just sitting upright, and I was like, why am I still? And then I realized my body was afraid. Was feeling fear. And it's like, why? What's going on?
Hmm.
And I saw creeping up by my chest of drawers. It was like a mini Dementor from the Harry Potter films. I mean, its presence was just ice in my veins, and I did not have good intentions. But then, as that danger came, there was this voice out of my heart, and all kind of out of the back of my mind, which took me out of paralysis and told me what to do. And it said, "Just open to total love." And somehow it's the in the narration was somehow the instructions on how to do that, or the deep knowing that I could do that. So I did that, and then the thing it kind of had a face by that point that it got close, and then it had a face of fear then.
Hmm.
And because I was open in love, like I felt like there was a beam coming through my body going to that thing, and I wanted to hug it. I was, I love you, and it ran the fuck out of there. out of my room,
Wow.
and never to be seen again. Fast forward from that, and I also threw in the line from the labyrinth, "You have no power over me."
Mm.
That's why I included that in the
Mm.
prelude to that story, because I had to throw that in there,
Yeah.
at the time. And then not long after that, another dark being, came into the room, and I knew how to deal with them now. It's like,
Mhm.
I did it once, and there was an automatic response. Only it came in peace, and it said, I was told about you," and it basically said, I was told that you could help me. And I said, "What do you have in mind?" And it had a very foul presence to it, but I was kind of, and my body wanted to respond in fear, but I knew there was something
Mm.
genuine going on. And then I basically started saying a bunch of words to it telepathically, and I said, "Well, um, you can, if you watch the door, because I need someone to make sure that only one spirit comes in at a time, and I need you to make sure that they're also ones that are really serious about moving on," because that was what would happen as a child. I had a little rocking chair that I would go sit in. I would dress as Sherlock Holmes, because Sherlock Holmes, like the Ghostbusters in our pre-chat, Sherlock Holmes was
Mhm.
it was a character that if I dressed as Sherlock Holmes, I felt safe, and I embraced that archetype. And so I would sit in my chair. I would have the being sit across from me, and I would close my eyes, and I would go into this big, vast nothingness and everythingness place.
Mm.
And I would go there, and I would somehow fold it in front of me, and move it into the room, and then I would kind of palpably feel them, move out.
Hmm.
And when I would open my eyes, the room would feel completely clean. And so this is what I did as a consulting detective, with my little deerstalker hat on and my pipe, to give me the props to make me, feel right about it.
Yeah.
And that worked when it was just one at a time, and they had good intentions. And I didn't like it when that wasn't the case,
Mhm.
because I wasn't going to be some psychoanalyst for a being that's trying to scare me. That's not what I had in mind for being a 5-year-old. So I had this guy. I assumed a guy. Later, I found out, yes, it was sort of a male, or they presented that way.
Mm.
Said, "You stand by the door all the time, and you just, you know, be my bouncer." Basically, I didn't have that term yet,
Right.
and that's the rest. And for the next, until age 17, they stood there. And actually, I would feel them when I'd walk by, and it wasn't unnerving to me. But every now I'd get out of the side and be like, "Oh yeah, you're still there. Good job, good job."
Nice.
He's like right by my door.
Huh.
And so then I had this series of dreams when I was 17. When I was 17, I'm sorry, I'm fast forwarding, going all over the map here. I had committed to meditating 6 hours a day. I'd gotten rid of a bunch of my possessions in my room, and I turned my room essentially into an ashram. And the place, there was something when I made that decision, the logic of my life in so many ways just rearranged. At the time, I'd also had two other beings that I had told to just stand in certain places and keep watch. So I had like three in
Wow.
there. I think it made me feel safe to bark orders at them, as well.
Mhm.
And so it was 3 mornings in a row, which was strange, where I woke up with sleep paralysis in the morning, in daylight. The first morning I woke up, and there was, a stern looking Edwardian lady with a high collar. Whenever I saw her, I didn't really like seeing her, but I was like, she's straight up. She's okay. She's
Yeah.
just stern.
Yeah.
She's just stern, but she's honest. So she can be by my closet door. She's cool. And she walked over, and I couldn't move my body because I was paralyzed, and she stood behind me. And I was trying to move my head to actually kind of say, you can't intimidate me. And then I fell asleep, because it was just so much effort just trying to do that.
Yeah.
And so that happened, and I was like, all right, okay. Then the next morning, the same damn thing happened at the same time, and it was it was a I think he was Mexican, and he had a garish sweater in the colors that they were popular in the 50s or the 70s.
Hmm.
Kind of like the oranges and browns and greens of that time. And he did the same walk, except this time, having the previous morning dealt with Edwardian stern lady, I felt I was prepped. I was able to get my whole body around and like look at him, you know, eye to eye, like that. Only this time there was so much love in his eyes. She wasn't communicative, but he was communicative. And
Mm.
he had a tear come out of his eyes, and I could feel this love. He sent it to my heart, and he basically, on behalf of him and the Stern lady, said, bye from both of us. You don't need us anymore.
Aw.
And yeah, that was a sweet
Yeah.
goodbye. And then it happened third morning in a row. Only it was the dude by the door that I mentioned
Oh,
before.
right.
And this time I wasn't paralyzed at all. I woke up in bed, and there he was. And instead of being a big black mass, which is how he presented initially,
Mm.
half of his face was human, half of his body was human, half was black. He also had a tear in his human-faced eye.
Mm.
And he said, I because of the service work I've done here, I'm gonna take a human incarnation. And
Whoa.
and he said thank you. And he said, you won't, he was kind of reiterating what the other guy said, but just said
Mm-hmm.
more like, you won't need protection from us ever again, because you're now protected by a much higher order,
Yeah.
because you made the choice to seek enlightenment with all your heart. You're in a totally different space now.
Mm.
And he went. So that
Wow.
was a more supernatural,
Whoa.
long-winded.
Gosh, I wish kids could be taught when they're little to have like bring in their guardian guards. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Ah,
yeah, it was
that's
totally reflexive. It was
yeah.
sometimes when I would have conversations with them or the other beings, vocabulary would come through my mind that I had not honestly learned yet.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my prose, my speaking to them was fairly sophisticated. So I would learn things in the process. I'd say, what did I just, what was that? You know,
Yeah. How am I putting
uh,
that?
what? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh
yeah,
man. Yeah, that's fascinating. Wow, thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Basically, I just want children to have some tools so they can deal with the boogeyman in the closet kind of situation. That would be great.
right, right.
Um, well, wonderful. Can you talk about sort of what were the events that led you to discovering Ishaya's Ascension meditation and kind of how that's like a huge part of your life now?
Yeah, massive. Yes,
Hmm.
I was a seeker, proper seeker, starting at 14. Before I was interested in a lot of these things, and watched the hell out of the Search of reruns, and loved my Time Life books on Buddhism and Tumo and
Hmm.
stuff like that, and just a wide range. But it was way on sort of the eclectic interest back burner
Right.
of life. I before the NDE, I wanted to be a lawyer or a politician. I thought that was going after. No more that desire was there.
Hmm.
So I started spiritual seeking at 14, after, by chance, being brought into a metaphysical bookstore. A lot of the good things in my childhood, my sister initiated, intentionally or unintentionally. This was one of those things. I was tagging along. I
Hmm.
went in, opened up a book, and it was talking about Samadhi and spiritual experiences. So I started that, and then I was just trying everything but and the kitchen sink for a while. And it came to a point when I was 17. I decided, as a good Scorpio that I was, I need to do this 2000%, or not.
Hmm.
And so I decided, all right, what's 2000%? Well, it looks like 6 hours a day of meditation and cold showers in the morning, and do a bunch of fasting and stuff like that. And I used meditations that I either learned in books or that people taught me when they came through town to teach workshops. And the discipline practice, which was most of what it was a little bit insane. And I kind of I did have experiences with it, but I almost think it wasn't because of, but despite of what I was putting myself through.
Hmm.
And so uh, I'll make the story short. Uh, I decided that a lot of my spiritual mentors who had been strangely in my small town had all moved out at the same
Hmm.
time in about the year 2001. And for a while I was complaining, I can't go hang out at my friend Austin's house anymore. Like, God damn, And I said,
Yeah.
let's be proactive. I'm going to start a metaphysical society. And then I will create the hub, and I will draw people to it. Well, now have people
Wow.
to talk to. So
Yeah.
my sister again was like up for that, and we created it together and went and put flyers around town. When the first person we thought we should talk to was a fellow I'd previously been introduced to at the grocery store, just a little bit older than me, and at the time he was Josiah. Now they're named Darshan. And so he was the first one we invited. He accepted to come, had a great first meeting with a bunch of people there, and then we meditated afterwards. As soon as I sat down to meditation with him, I didn't know what he was doing, but I knew he was doing something that was working because I could feel it. I could feel something there. And then he and my sister, basically fell in love, and eventually he'd be my first brother-in-law. So they were just talking the rest of the time too. So he was in our orbit at that time. I don't know if it was him or somebody else who funneled to me the autobiography of a yogi,
Right.
but it came like it does for so many people in the world. It came at the right time. It hit me like the best ton of bricks ever. It was so wonderful. I read that book, and just opening the book and reading it before school would start was opening my heart. And strangely, I would feel also flows of energy coming down to the top of my head into my body and coming up from my feet up through my spine and both ways at once, just reading this book. And so I was thinking, I guess maybe I'm going to head to the Kriya Yoga folks. And I was, did a little bit of research on them. This is no bad reflection on them, but I looked at SRF, I looked at Ananda, with these other places, and I thought, they don't have my right music. My grandmother liked the Ananda brochure, but the first time I picked that brochure up, even though it was a really nice one, the word sex scandal went through my head. When I looked at the picture, then it turns out that's exactly what was happening.
Oh boy. Yeah.
That's Swami Kriyananda was having people give him hand jobs. And anyhow, that's
Yeah.
lurid, but it's good, So we didn't go there, but then I got to this one part of the book where Yogananda says anybody who prays to Babaji, he will listen, no matter who you are. So I said, okay, that seems terribly improbable and unrealistic, but we're going to take you up on this, Yogananda. So I did, and I got, it was the second night, the second or third night. We'll go with 3 nights conservatively. The third night of doing this, when I reached my deepest point in meditation at night, a ball of energy was like felt like an actual ball was stuffed into the top of my head in a very comfortable, pleasurable way. With that ball came a voice which said, "Pay attention to this frequency." And there was kind of a pitch, a very pleasant pitch that was going on. And I didn't know who was talking to me, if that was Babaji or my imagination or an astral imposter, but I said, like, well, this is interesting. Let's ride with this and see what happens. I don't think I'm going to get possessed here. So let's see what's going on. And so I said, okay, great. Because my question was, please guide me to my path, because I don't think I know I haven't found my home path yet. I'm searching for it. And I was, I arranged to graduate school early. As well, graduate a half year early, because I wanted to run away to a monastery. That was the truest thing in my heart. I didn't have a problem with school. I was good at it. But I looked around saying, like, this is just all bullshit. What are we doing here? At least what am I doing here? Because I know better now.
Yeah.
And if I know better, I should act on it as quickly as possible. And so I think it was 2 days later, I was coming home from picking up trash from the streets of my town. It's kind of like my self-invented service work.
Wow.
And I got to my block, and that pitch started. And then I was walking home, I don't know, like 100 feet from the end of the block to my house, 150. And it just kept getting bigger. Then I saw then Josiah and my sister on the steps of our house. And he said something like, hey, I had extra money show up in my bank account. Do you want to come to this, for my meditation class tuition, do you want to come to Minneapolis this weekend to this meditation class? And there was no thought. It was just a huge yes, just shot through my body, out through my mouth, which was strange in those days, because I was like a Dr. No type character. I would say no to everything in order to protect my 6 hours, because I felt that like if I did 4 hours, I'm really shirking my duty.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's really hard on myself. I mean, terribly.
Wow.
Uh, and so yeah, I said yes, and that was what got me there. And I don't share this with people who learn from me because I don't want them to compare their experience at all. But
Right.
for me, within 45 to 60 seconds of doing the first meditation technique in that class, I was in the deepest Samadhi experience that I had experienced thus far in my life.
Wow.
And I had this sense, there was always in my childhood this music in the background. I call it music. It's not really music, but there's a music in the background, and I was chasing it. And when I was became a spiritual seeker at 14, I suppose I was really chasing it. I would find it in different traditions here and there. Like for me, it was very strong out of the Theosophical Society of the 1880s,
Right.
when Blavatsky was alive still.
Yeah.
And it was like really strong. I was like, oh God, those are my people, but I'm separated by about 120 years in time here. Like, and then I look at the modern Theosophical Society, and again, I was like, it's dead. I mean, interesting, but like as a vital, transformative thing that's
Mm-hmm.
going to get you enlightened, I was like, nah, not waste of my time. It's not there anymore. That was my quick decision. And so I was searching for that music when I found that music, and it's in the greatest concentration that I'd experienced yet or since in that meditation practice.
Wow.
And so I stayed with it, and I thought, okay, I'm going to be skeptical here still. Keep your feet on the ground. It could be a workshop high.
Mm-hmm.
But I was having buttons that people could previously push not be there anymore, just within a day.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
All right, so we're gonna go with this and see what happens.
Ooh.
Funny thing to add to that, which is germane,
Mm-hmm.
is that a few years before, must have been 1999, and I was visiting my sister at her East Coast college in Northampton, Massachusetts, and I was having a great time with her. And she showed me just wonderful. It was wonderful, and it was near the end of our trip, and we were walking around the street. At the time, I thought I was going to be an actor or a musician, because I didn't think I could be a yogi or a mystic because I was a white kid from Wisconsin or something like that.
Uh-huh.
I wasn't Tibetan, but I didn't want to be a politician or a lawyer anymore. So I was trying to find something in the middle.
Right.
And I thought, okay, you've got to be kind of a creative artist. That's sort of, maybe that's what you can do. And so that's what I thought I was going to be. So we saw this sign that said Gypsy Palm Reader, $5 readings. And it was an old Victorian house up on a hill. And it was like, price was right for us. So we went up, and I thought, we're just going to have a good old fun time. There's probably not a real palm reader who's good at that. We came in, and sure enough, she was dressed as what an American would think a gypsy looks like, but living in Europe, it looks nothing like an actual Roma
Right.
person. It was a Russian or Ukrainian lady, kind of hamming it up, and then her son was wearing an Adidas tracksuit with a little white beater and a gold chain. I remember him saying, like, pay first, then read. And it's like, okay, we paid, we're good. We're not going to try to cheat you here.
Yeah.
So I went up to her, and I was going to make sure she couldn't cold read me or anything.
Mm.
So I was thinking, I will not tell her what I want to do with my life. I will look like I want to be an accountant, or something like that. Something, I don't know. That might have been the face. And I gave her my palm, and the first thing she told me was, "You're absolutely not going to be, an actor or musician." And I thought she just assumed every young man wants to be an actor, musician. So I still didn't want to let her cold read me
Right.
here. But then she said it again, and I was like, "Oh, fuck this! I'm just going to argue with her." And it's like, no, you know what? We're gonna, we'll make it happen. You'll see. I've got good willpower. I think I have enough talent.
Mm-hmm.
It's realistic. I've got a good school for it. And then she said, no, 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 absolutely no possibility. And I didn't even ask her how she derived this information. Like, was my Mount of Jupiter telling you this? I didn't get into that. And then I asked her, what do you think I'm going to do with my life?
Mm.
And she kind of, years later, like the character Sybil Trelawney in the Harry Potter films reminded me of this lady, because Sybil Trelawney is Emma Thompson's character, and she's like a bad psychic, but every
Right.
now and then she's a great
She
psychic.
got one. Yeah.
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 And I thought this lady's whole countenance changed. I didn't think she was acting. I thought, is she having a medical emergency here? I was getting worried when she's holding my palm right in front of me. And she said, actually, you're going to travel the world teaching the true mystical teachings of the Christ. And then I looked over and I saw like a Orthodox kind of crucifix on the wall. And I was like, she's trying to convert me.
Yeah, she's biased.
And so, yeah. So then I was like, yeah, you know what? And like, I don't have a religious bone in my, even though she said mystical, she looked confused at the words coming out of her mouth. I still thought she was trying to convert me. So I said, we're going to have to agree to disagree on this one. She really butchered my sisters. I mean, that did not, she said my sister's going to have all these kids and, like tons, it's like, no. So we just had a good time, and then 5 years later, I'm on a plane and I'm reading the back of the book that was attached to my Ishayas Ascension meditation practice. And I'd read this back many times. And one of the bylines was, now in time for this or that millennium, the true mystical teachings of the Christ. And I just had a laugh on the airplane because I was like, oh my God, because I'd forgotten the palm reading. That lady got it.
Wow.
And then I tried to right there and then, I laughed and everybody in the seats like looked at me. And it was just fine. And then I tried to send a telepathic message to this place, like, whatever plane of existence you're on right now, you got me. I was that kid in 1999 who you told this and that to. So that was sort of like a foreshadowing that I did not see.
Yeah.
I did not see, and it did not register at the time because yeah.
Wow. Whew. Yeah, that is an amazing sort of premonition story with a psychic that was sometimes right. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Man.
Her batting average was 500 that day.
500.
So,
okay, good.
She did that day. She was 1 for 2 at least.
That's that day.
Yeah.
I know we kind of talked, just backing up a little bit to Yogananda. I know in our conversation during my astrology reading, you said something that it kind of like opened up a lot for me about Yogananda and the divine feminine. And how he was sort of he was a personification of that, is kind of how I remember it. But I don't know if you want to kind of talk a little bit about that.
Oh, I'm always happy to wade into potentially controversial waters with all the folks downstream of Yogananda. I mean, the dude thought he was the reincarnation of William the Conqueror.
That's right.
Yes. That doesn't let out there. But other mystics and Yogananda at different times, had alluded to, like, well, I'm doing the work of the Divine Mother here, and I've personally, I always just felt that he was the personification of a male personification in some ways of Mother Shakti. And if he was anything with the divine pantheon, he was a mama's boy. At least that, at the very least, he was a mama's boy.
Yeah.
In terms of, I think, teaching style and the fact that he had this big nest up at Mount Washington where he was taking care of all these people all the time. Yeah.
And I think
I do not see a stern patriarch.
No,
I know he could get stern with people.
Right.
He had that range, but he was not he was a softie.
Yeah. Because definitely in Autobiography of a Yogi, one of the standout pieces for me, at least, he talked a lot about visiting the Kali temple quite a bit, like a specific temple in his hometown. I think it was his hometown. And then he had like another mystical experience with the divine feminine of seeing his mother and then all the mothers. And then it was pretty amazing. So yeah, until you said that, I didn't connect that for some weird reason, that it was like, oh, that Kali temple experience, plus he's kind of the incarnation, or of the divine feminine, is pretty amazing. So
he was always praying to the Divine Mother in that book. I mean, if we're just going on what's in that text, minus the rest of the context of his life, which is much larger, that's absolutely where the feel of it, for sure.
Wow,
for sure. I believe that was, I don't know if that, because I haven't read it in a while, but I'm guessing it was when he was living in Calcutta, and he may have been going to Ramakrishna's temple and school down by the water.
That's right.
I'm not sure. Probably one of our listeners is going to put in the comments section, actually
correct everything. Yeah, that's fine.
Please do.
Yeah.
Off my rocker here.
Right. Oh, man. And then I know to kind of um in your, so you had the experience with the fortune teller, and then you're on a plane and you're like,
Mm.
wow, it's a Shaya's meditation for me. Um yeah, and I know in some of the other interviews, you talked about your sort of your monastic life as a teenager, and you mentioned
Mm.
about the 6 hours of meditation or 4 hours of meditation
Yeah,
a day.
no, six. It was six as a high schooler. Yeah,
And
yeah.
then your 3 a.m. cold showers is another point that
Oh God, yeah. Oh God, yeah, yeah. And yeah, in Wisconsin in the winter, I think it feels even colder when it
oh,
comes out of the. And I was really kind of beating the crap out of myself, which I don't recommend. But
right.
I wasn't doing this thing where you're like, let's start out medium and then just kind of work our way down, because I couldn't do it. Like I just didn't have the nerve to work myself. So what I would do is it would just be like rip the Band-Aid off all the way to cold, pull it out, you know, move the plastic curtain.
Yeah,
You're going in.
right.
You don't die. Don't die, basically. It's like, and I would be crying. I was actually crying. I
Yeah.
was crying because I was almost like I was literally, that comedy thing, like pulling myself
Hmm.
into that thing every morning. But I have to say that I did feel like disease could not touch me. Uh,
Wow.
I mean, I was 18 too, so that was working, and I was very fit.
Oh,
Except
yeah.
when I fasted too much. When I fasted too much, I started eating the muscle mass too, and then I ended up. I was kind of looking like Gandhi,
Oh,
you
wow.
know, and people were worried about me. I was on suicide watch
Oh,
my
no.
last year of high school.
Yeah.
I had no idea, but my dad told me later. I was like, and I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense from their perspective, because I was actually giving away my favorite possessions to people and saying,
Oh,
I want to give this to you. And I was down to like a skeleton, and wasn't going to the lunchroom with the other students anymore. I
oh,
was
man.
meditating in the newspaper room at lunchtime, or and so like, oh, yeah, I see why they thought I was
Yeah,
going to
your
kill
poor
myself.
family.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah,
Mm.
they really had a rough time with that strange quick, for them it's very strange abrupt transformation. For
Oh,
me it
sure.
was, this thing has been building a foundation for several
Mm.
years, and then
Hmm.
it just pops out.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know.
Needs to be
So yeah,
realized.
that was actually an entirely enjoyable time, and I'm so glad that we did that, and we kind of burned we scratched deeply the ascetic itch,
Hmm.
and then I think I was ready to have effortless meditation come into my life,
Yeah.
which is, yeah, the ascension practices.
Yeah. Because
Yeah,
then so you're on the plane, and now is this before you join the
that was years
monastery,
after, actually.
or
The
was it
plane story
after?
is years after.
Oh,
Yeah,
years after.
I was
Okay.
already teaching. I put it together
Oh.
because I was traveling the world to teach
Oh, right.
at
So
a
you're like,
class, and then it was years after I'd been in this thing for forever. And
hmm.
so yeah, I mean, I didn't need much more convincing than my great, fantastic experiences at my first class, and then ongoing. I just slotted that in as a 4 hour day meditation,
Right.
and I was being a little bit more liberal instead of the six, but I just put that in there, and
Whew.
things are moving quickly,
Hmm.
internally.
Wow.
So yeah, yeah.
So since you were teaching meditation, like what does that look like? Because I know when you've done workshops and you do classes.
Hmm.
So what are there either of those look like for a participant?
Those are same,
Same,
basically.
same.
I mean,
Okay.
yeah, usually I do like I mean, I often do a weekend format, just because still most people are able to, by average, get off on the weekend to do that sort of stuff, but it doesn't
Hmm.
really matter any day. And so when I do a group class, I do them in person. I've also adopted them to be able to do them online, which I
Right.
sometimes get a little bit of flack for. Uh, Either way, it's about the same. It's the same
Okay.
same kind of format. There's kind of I build people up to longer meditation sessions. Not that like that's an important thing, but just I like to have people get sufficient time
Hmm.
to. I think of it almost like learning a physical skill, or something that's more musical, and with this practice. And so it's kind of a mantra practice. So I want them to sort of marinate with those, stew with those mantras in their nervous system, and we gradually, over 2 or 3 days, uh, stew for a little bit longer and longer periods of time, and then break that up with me doing lectures on different topics and answering questions and
Cool.
kind of back and forth. And it always seems to end a bit too quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, especially for you, because you do have so much knowledge to share. And then for the participants, it's kind of nice to kind of get away from your life for a little bit and do something that
Yeah.
feels good for you. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, that's one thing that's always gratifying is that usually even I teach a lot of people who kind of are self-described I'm unable to meditate people.
Mm-hmm.
And so saying nothing will work for me. I say, well, and yet you're here. It's like, well, I figured I'd try with you one more time or something like that. It's like, okay, let's give it a shot. Let's see what happens. And usually by the end of the class, when I start taking people out of meditation, it's those people who are saying like, hey, I could have gone much longer. What's up with that? You're pulling us out too early. And saying, well, that was 40 minutes right there. They're like, no, it seemed like 10. It's like, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's always gratifying to see people, very easily be able to do 40 minutes or an hour and have it be, just like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's also been another trend from teaching meditation has been having insomniacs report sleeping for the first time in years, or having a restful sleep, a continuous sleep throughout a whole night. That has been common the last 20 years of teaching, which always still blows my mind when people come up. And it used to be funny because I just have people come up and very intensely after the first night of the class, and they sometimes grab my shoulders. That's why I'm putting my hands here. They're like, I slept. And then I'm like, yes. It's like, no, you don't understand. I didn't share this with you. I'm an insomniac, Then it's like, oh, okay, gotcha. Get what you're saying.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Oh,
Stuff like that.
Yeah, that's powerful. I do remember when I was reading sort of the description of Ishaya's Ascension, it does have that mantra component. And I have a practice where I do Kundalini yoga, and there's sort of there's, you do the kriyas, you do a layout, you do the chanting or whatever. And I do find that the chant, at least for me, I think it's kind of different for everybody, sort of what they're in or whatever for meditation, but the chanting does kind of get you in this sort of rhythm of, and it kind of helps not clear the mind necessarily, but you're more focused on the chanting. So it's not like you're letting all the other things come in.
Right. Yeah. And that's probably vocalized. And so this mantra practice is non-vocalized. So it's an internal thing. And it's not as rhythmic, but what they share in logic is that you're using a sacred syllable or a sacred string of syllables or a sacred prayer. And we're using it as a vehicle that just naturally brings the mind into deeper and deeper relaxation. That's what any effective mantra or similar technique, because it can be done with Hebrew. I have a lot of people in my life, just my short sample size, Hebrew, Sanskrit, and the Ascension practice, all different language bases, have all been similarly effective in taking the body into profound relaxation.
Wow.
And,
are you doing any sort of I know we usually save that for the end, but we'll probably revisit it, but are you doing any classes or meditation anytime soon, or what's
depending on when this goes out, maybe it'll be the next day. By the time it goes out, I'm doing another online course November 18th and 19th.
Oh, okay.
So that's my next online course. I haven't scheduled any in-person courses yet. I live over in Europe, and I don't do a lot. I might teach an in-person class in Portugal, and I might do some more classes in the UK. We tend to get up there, and often teach in sort of the West Country. So kind of Somerset, Gloucestershire, and we have a deep love for Cardiff in Wales. So there's sort of and Liverpool. There's a magnet that goes out west, even though London is its own magnet. We've taught classes there as well. So that'll probably come. I post them on my website so people can check out if there's anything coming in their area.
Awesome. Yeah, I definitely Yeah, I definitely want to check it out at some point because it sounds very intriguing. It sounds like a lot of different modalities I've done, but it's kind of one
Mm.
one kind of more focused. So I like that.
Mm.
Um, let's see. So do you have any so kind of with that, we've talked a little bit about some spiritual teachers that you've had or role models,
Yeah.
but were there some additional ones that were impactful on your path that you would like to talk about?
God, probably a big three.
Mm.
Um, First one is when I was a teenager, young teenager. They all met me when I was a teenager, actually.
That's
Very
so
short
funny.
window of time. Yeah, when I was and I can't forget Pam really, but I spent the most time in those years eventually with a fellow by the name of Austin, who was introduced to me by my dear friend and mentor Pam. She was a transcendental meditation teacher and a fantastic psychic who moved to my hometown and was giving readings at the Metaphysical store and would
Wow.
just take the time to chat with me, which looking back I appreciate immensely. Here's somebody 40s or 50s taking the time to really give attention to a 14-year-old when she probably had
Aw.
other things she could be doing with life. So eternally grateful for Pam. Then she introduced me to this fellow named Austin. Austin came and he said that, well, now the trees are going to sleep. And any new age person could say some crazy shit like that. But the way he said it
Right.
and the look in his eyes and I felt his presence from about 30 feet.
Whoa.
Uh, and it was great. I
Yeah.
really vibed with it. And I got talking to him, and it turned out that he was something called a walk-in. And after meeting him, I started walking around my hometown, and I noticed all these signs that said "walk-ins welcome" at hair salons. And I thought, oh my God, I had no idea that hair salons were so metaphysically oriented. You know, I was
Right.
having a blood moment. I was like, they're everywhere. Everybody knows about these walk-ins. Oh my God, like no, obviously it was different. But people may not have heard the term a walk-in.
Mm.
I'll tell Austin's story, which he told to me, which was,
Yeah.
well, actually, I lived in a small town, and in a small town, everybody knows everybody's business. So when my dad told me, "You're hanging out with who?" Because before he died, Eldo Austin, and came back,
Mhm.
was a notorious town asshole. Just a and so when I met Austin, he said, "Yeah, the old guy," meaning the other guy who he
Mm.
used to be. The other guy, he was at the hospital running on the treadmill doing the stress test for your heart to
Yeah.
see how prone you'd be to a heart attack, and he had a fucking heart attack on the treadmill. That's
Oh
how prone he was to
no.
a heart. So the
Oh
machine
my
really
gosh.
pushed him into it. He died, massive heart attack, died. He said, "Yeah, he was on the table, and then I came in, and we tagged out." And I came into the body. I kind of scared some people when I came back to life again. And he said, "Yeah, his story was actually it was a multi-lifetime yarn actually that he
Mm.
told." He said the other guy was a reincarnation of a cavalry officer who had served in General Crook's army, exterminating the Apaches in the Southwest. And he said
Right.
I was one of the people he exterminated. I was like a medicine man or shaman. He had a different word. I don't remember it. He came in and he had a detailed knowledge of Native American ritual of the Southwest. And he was brought into the tribes down there. He even looked Native American. His face kind of changed. He lost pretty much most of his friends
Mm.
when he came back in because they were kind of assholes like him. He had to get a divorce because she was kind of an asshole too.
Right.
And he had like one friend who was able to kind of stay in the orbit. And it was pretty much 0 to 60, in other words, in 3 seconds, right? It's not a gradual thing. And he was kind of a different guy.
Hmm.
And that can be kind of like a walk-in experience. And anyways, no matter how he framed it, he went from being town asshole who had once leaned over at my father's bank and choked another loan officer because he wouldn't be given a dubious loan to him. That's how bad
Whoa.
he notoriously he was. And he went from that to being this amazing amazing psychic
Hmm.
and ritual holder with
Wow.
crazy energy around him. So I would go to his house because I was having all sorts of weird stuff with my head
Hmm.
going on, not non-medical. Like it would go open. I'd be leaving my body at night. I would get weird headaches. He called them, oh, you're having processing headaches. I said, processing? Yeah, everything, your body is being realigned. I would go to his house. Within 100 feet of his house, I would feel a phase shift, and in my body, I walked through a veil. I'd get in. He could be doing anything. He just let me take naps on his couch
Wow.
for 20 minutes, because then I'd feel right as rain. It was like a instant meditation. And then I would leave, and often I'd go in. He'd be under his truck in his garage. I'd say, Austin, I had to use the couch. He'd say, all right, freeloader, go ahead. And I'd go in, and then I'd come out and I say, yeah, thanks, Austin. He said, and he'd just laugh.
Wow.
A lot of weird stuff happened around him. I mean, I tell this on my YouTube channel, but I'll tell the story here, or a couple stories, if you don't mind.
Oh, yes, please.
I'll start with the less weird one and end with the weirdest one. They're both cool.
Yes.
I went to the beach a lot to swim in the summers as a teenager, because I enjoyed it. Good exercise. I would often put my goggles on and like find every now and then a $5 bill at the bottom of the thing. Once a 20, tens. So I like being out there. One day I went up to sit on the end of the pier, and I went into kind of a untaught meditation. And I had this thing, I have to open my eyes. I opened my eyes. There was an endlessly tall beam of goldish, whitish light that looked like a flame coming out of the end of the lake. And it must have been, I couldn't estimate the width, many boats wide. So 80 feet wide.
Wow.
From where I could see.
Mm-hmm.
And then it went up all the way to the sky. And then I, wipe my eyes, saying like, am I seeing something here? Come back up, it's still there.
Whoa.
And nobody else is seeing it. Everyone, I'm looking, is anyone else seeing this? Then I just left, didn't mention it, came back the next day, saw it again. Then I went to see my friend Austin. So I didn't mention it to him, and he said, oh, you saw the light at the end of the lake, without me saying anything. This would happen all the time. He said, like, wow, oh, you saw it. And he said, you. I was like, okay, thanks for letting me know that. I said, yeah, it's then I had this dream. I had these dreams a lot. I called them dreams, of course, because they happen at night.
Right.
And what would transpire is I would find myself in what I could only describe as floating cities. And I would be taking classes and subjects that I had no aptitude and sometimes no interest in my waking life in, or no knowledge that they even existed. Sometimes I would be teaching classes, which was even more bizarre because I was a teenager. It's like, I'm teaching, and there's all these adults, and there'd be almost like Greek amphitheater things. So anyways, one night after having one of these happen, I think I was giving a riveting talk on the spiritualized botany of the 21st century, which, I didn't follow. I'm becoming a botanist or anything, but I go over to Austin's house again. I don't mention anything. And he said, I saw your talk last night. It was great. I saw you. And I said, what talk, where? And he said, yeah, we were both up on the ship. He called them ships. I call them floating cities. We were both up on the ship above the lake. Indeed, it was actually above. It was connected to that beam of light.
Whoa!
When I had the dream, and I thought I was just dreaming it, and so yeah, a lot of these confirmations would just kind of come out with me. And I said, and what I talk about is something about mysticism and plants. That's what he said.
Something about that.
He said it's a little complicated, so I kind of went over here. I was like, all right. So yeah, this would happen. He also had this Edgar Cayce ability to find my retainer that I had to have in my mouth, and I would lose it constantly because I hated the feel of it in my mouth, and it was clear plastic, and so you could just like see through it.
Yeah.
If you put it down, I was constantly losing it, and then but I had to find it because I was like, I didn't want to disappoint my dad and had caused an expense.
Yeah.
Like that. So I'd like go, oh God, what am I gonna do? I call Austin. It's like desperation. Go to the phone. I was like, Austin, do you know where my retainer might be? He would start laughing, and then it would get to the point where he rang me. He would call me when my retainer was lost and tell me where it was.
Because you knew you lost it.
Yeah, because he was told, my guides told me you lost the retainer again. So yeah, you're right. I was about to call you. He's saying like, yeah, one time I called him, it was very Edgar Casey. Like he told me he'd never been in my house and I never described my house or the furnishings or the arrangement of the rooms. So he said it's under the blue couch in the TV room, under the left front leg in the by the Newsweek. And I went and I searched. I thought I did a good job. I'm saying, Austin, for the first time, you're inaccurate. It's not there. You know, I got to find this thing. It's like, no, you looked very poorly. It's still it's in the newspaper by the Newsweek. You have to open up the pages and there it was. And it was just like every time he was 100% fine. And the funny thing is, I was a teenager and I never thought to ask him anything more
Beyond that.
significant than my retainer. You know, it's like it never crossed my mind. It was always like a desperation thing. I didn't want to instrumentalize him. That was part of it. And I was willing to instrumentalize him because it was like a desperate thing.
Yeah.
You know. So then there was a time I was at his house. I see the time. I'll keep going. I was at his house and we used to talk at his kitchen table. It's like satsang, one-to-one satsang. We could talk about anything, and there's just presence. And my mind couldn't have a thought in that place. And I had this sudden notion that I had to go into his backyard. It's like, Austin, I got to go to your backyard. I just went. I'll be back there, you know, really drawn to the backyard. I walked up, there's this lovely walking path that was one of those things that's a former railroad track where it's kind of raised up. And so I walked up that, and it was a lovely leafy walkway now without the railroad tracks, you know, dappled sunlight. And I'm walking on this for, must have been just a few seconds. And all of a sudden I feel like I almost pooped my pants. Like, yeah, there was poop going down the chute.
Right.
And somehow, and it was weird. Like that had never happened in my life before, since. Right. And I squeezed and clenched like, somehow, just in the nick of time. It's like, you know, like, this is not, you can't have this happen. Yeah. And then I realized that my body was in a state of like fight or flight. It's like, what the fuck is going on with my body? Why? Because there was no stressor at all. Then I look in front of me because I was just kind of looking around, you know, looking at the trees. And then there's this thing about 50 feet away, maybe 60. It's hard to say. And it started to dawn on me, that's what that there's a connection between that thing that I'm seeing and what was going on here. And it's a big animal. And it's big. And it's like, that ain't no dog. And I'm like, is that a wolf? Like a big black wolf? And like, it's not, no. And so my mind's going through a Rolodex of what this thing could be. And I was like, it's moving like a cat with that whole front shoulder walk thing that just like, it's a big cat. You know, it's like, it's a panther, it's a jaguar. And I'm like, there's no panthers in Wisconsin. And plus it had this weirdness around it. It had like in the film Predator, like on a hot day when you see the sort of the heat lines. Yeah. There were heat lines all around it, like 2 feet out around this thing. And I'm saying, okay, it's a weird jaguar. And my mind is then deciding like, can I fight this thing? Am I going to need to fight this thing or do I need to run? Then before coming to the conclusion, I find myself running. So I turned around and then I'm thinking like, oh no, the Discovery Channel told me never run from big cats. It stimulates their chase instinct. It's like, and then I was sure I was going to have a searing pain of a claw or teeth going into my neck any time now. Of course, it didn't happen. I get to almost to Austin's door. I'm so glad that I've practiced as a teen boy, running at doors, opening doors, and jumping in a seamless fashion as possible. Did that, pushed the door behind me with my feet like I'm in Jurassic Park or something, getting away from a raptor, lock the door. I'm on the ground panting. Already on the ground is Austin. He'd fallen off his chair. He's laughing. And I'm saying, and I'm looking around still, making sure the door is going to hold because I think a hulking beast is after me. And he's laughing. He said like, oh, don't worry. You only met the jaguar. It's an etheric jaguar and it likes you. I was like, what? Like, oh God. And he said like, you know, it's actually it had a name and I've forgotten the name. He said, yeah, that jaguar was assigned to me. as the protector of this property, so I could do my work.
Wow.
And he said that that the jaguar, first of all, kind of called you out there, and then introduced itself to you, showed you, is it's saying that you're in the pride, or you're in the family,
Oh,
and its protection is extended to you, because I'm basically like the sorcerer's apprentice here,
right.
more or
Yeah.
less. Uh, and that right there, because it's very, I mean, I was skeptical as well of all these experiences, but that at least told me that either he was reading my mind,
Mm.
again, like he'd had many times before. He had implanted the entire scenario into my mind like some wizard, or there was a really fucking etheric jaguar. And I went with door number 3, because that seemed,
Right.
with all the other experiences, the most likely out of the group.
Yeah.
That was Austin. That was life at Austin's.
That's amazing.
Heads going open, Hebrew coming down into my skull, even though he's sort of in this quasi Native American tradition, or he's in a Native American tradition, but as in the body of a former town asshole.
Right.
You know, he gave me the book, The Keys of Enoch.
Mm.
He was very careful with his books. He kept them so well, and I wouldn't even like borrow some, because like, Austin, I'm gonna have an accident with that one, so I'm gonna pass. I can take care of this one and not get a scratch on it. And he said, okay, good that you know yourself. It's like yes. I picked up The Keys of Enoch, that his copy. I've never felt this from that. And it was like, my hands were had pleasant electrical shocks going through them, and everything was open. So I was spoiled. I think
Yeah.
I was definitely spoiled by some of these mentors who were in my town: Pam, Austin, Walter Matthew Brown.
Mm-hmm.
Years later, I had 2 spiritual teachers who were in Oregon. I kind of think 2, really. I only asked one to be an official teacher. There was a package deal. At the time, a husband and wife. They might not think very highly of how I teach the meditation these days. I'm a bit of a renegade.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, and I don't associate with their organization because I don't think it's well run.
Mm-hmm.
And but I love them immensely. They had a huge effect on me. One of them was named Kalima, one was named Mahadeva. One thing that I didn't see at the time was Kalima had a prelude to her as well, which is strange. I was when I was about 15, I used to walk at night. This is before I learned any meditation, mind you, but I was really depressed and sad, and in grief, not having a mother, and it felt like I was a bit of an orphan, because I
Yeah.
didn't feel my father, was able to be there, because he was going through his own grief.
Mm-hmm.
So I liked the freedom of being able to walk around at midnight in my hometown, but at the same time, I was really hoping for some care.
Yeah.
And so I went out to the corner across my house, and it just came to me, speak to the sky right now, because the stars were vast. It was beautiful. And I asked, and it just came out of my heart without me thinking. It was like, please, could you give me a mother? Because whoever's listening, you can tell I'm not really doing that well on my own here.
Yeah.
This is, I'm a mess. And to my extreme surprise, immediately after saying that, I felt somebody speaking to my ears simultaneously. Someone speaking to my ear. When when you can feel a body over there
Yeah.
without looking. Yeah, it
Yeah.
felt like that. And then there was also a voice up in the sky at the same time. It was coming from both places, which was strange.
Right.
And at first the voice said, I'll be your mother. And I was like, I was by the cemetery, so I'm like, okay, no, but it
Hold
did
on.
not feel like a discarnate being at
Right.
all. It was very different presence than any I'd ever felt.
Yeah.
And I said, like, okay, yeah, not going to sign any papers yet, but who, like, didn't say that, but that's what I was thinking. Like, who are you? And they introduced themselves as the dark goddess of destruction. And she said, I'm the dark goddess of destruction. I've always been your mother, and I'll take care of you in this life. I said, okay, sounds pretty. And actually hearing those words, it made complete sense in my mind.
Yeah.
It was not at all off-putting. It was like, oh yeah, of course, my mother would be the dark goddess of destruction. It makes perfect sense. And then then there was no more presence there. And a few times I would go over the years to that same spot, look up at the sky, and kind of like it was a phone booth or something like
Right.
that. and nothing, crickets for years. So I just kind of filed that away as like a one-off, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I end up at this Ishayas Ascension sort of ashram or monastery on the Oregon coast, and I didn't really know Sanskrit names or what they meant.
Right.
And one of the main teacher when I arrived was named Kalima, and it took a while for me to learn what that meant.
Mm-hmm.
And then it took a while longer for me to actually remember that incident from the street corner. And I was like, oh, I see. You know, I was, cosmic Kali sent,
Mm-hmm.
arranged to have one of me cross paths with a physical sort of finger of her,
Right.
one of the many. So there were a lot of stitches like that, which sort of tied together
Mm-hmm.
in a very short time, and manifested in the experiences at that ashram,
Yeah.
including dreaming up my job that I had there a year beforehand, which was
Mm-hmm.
also strange.
Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah, high magic,
High magic. That's right.
high magic. Yeah,
Um, I know that was something we wanted to touch on with the astrology piece because you're an astrologer. Did you want to talk about sort of your astrology practice and then sort of magic or high magic? Because I see them kind of very related.
yeah. They're very related. I sometimes, some people have suggested I use a different title than astrologer. Not saying that I'm a bad astrologer, but they're saying that I'm kind of they wanted me to use the word oracle.
Mm,
As
hmm.
somebody I have a very high opinion of, like, I haven't done that because it sounded kind of hoity-toity for me, to use a word like that. I was like, I don't know if I should. I don't want to, water down that term,
Mm,
by using it. But astrology came. Me doing astrology was not something I was ever planning to do remotely. This was one of the many things where my wife knew what I was going to do well before I did it, and I was like, yeah, it's not going to happen. That's that it does,
right.
right?
Yeah.
Because this is the pattern. Uh, and I'd had exposure as a child, but I was like, oh, okay. Even if it's real and it's not confirmation bias or a number of other logical fallacies, I could explain that. Even if it's real, by the time I got to the monastic phase, I was like, it's kind of superficial and shallow. People should just find the ultimate reality with a capital R. I mean, that's my instinct of that, like, rip that bandage off.
Right.
Don't play around with these things. I don't. It doesn't. It does. Knowing about your past lives, help you out of suffering, etc., etc. A number. So I wasn't going to do that. But then we were in Vancouver, BC, and it was we walked by a storefront, and there was this man who was giving astrological and tarot readings. Turned out he'd been a Zen meditator for 40 years. Very serious Zen meditator, studied
Well,
at the Rochester Zen Center with Roshi Philip Kapleau, very high grade practice and teaching. And yet here he is, as in his own words, saying, masquerading as a fortune teller or moonlighting as a fortune teller. I was like, I love a man with these kinds of contradictions. We got to support this guy. We became fast friends with a man up in Vancouver by the name of Rob Inglis, really lovely tarot reader and astrologer. So I ended up taking a class from him, an astrology class. And as soon as I'm getting into the materials and the syllabus, I'm eating it up. And it's going into me like it's water I've been trying to drink for a long time, and I've been without. It just goes right in, and it's like, yeah, we've got to do this. I had earlier in my life, my mother was a great therapist. I think in the last few years of her life, she went and got a master's and did the practicum, and I think she just had a real knack for it.
hmm.
Those books were in the house: Jungian stuff, Hillman stuff, Freud, and I always had a sense I would like to do work like that, and more in the Jungian sense, connect people to their song, connect people to their center. I found in astrology that work.
Yeah.
It became very. I didn't know that Jung was so into astrology when I was doing the thing, because I hadn't really studied in depth. I didn't know those connections at the
Right.
time. I put that later on as I'm reading more books. I'm like, oh, of course, Jesus. I'm dealing. This is an archetypal language,
Yeah.
and so that became a passion, and I found that it wasn't I don't think it was as counter to as facilitating as awakening as I thought, or as frivolous or tertiary. I mean, sometimes I do, and I like to keep it real with my astrologers and my clients, and say like, hey, we're talking about your costume here, and so my middle ground is, I think that, you know, I'll inject a little Alan Watts here, and especially his late stage Taoist Alan Watts in his wonderful last book, Tao, the Watercourse Way. He'll be talking about the difference between Judeo-Christianity and Taoism, and he uses an analogy that, okay, in Judeo-Christianity, the root of the system is an assumption that there's something wrong with our nature that has to be remediated. You know, and you know, that's I think it's a little simplistic for him to do that, but you know, I'll expect the analogy. It's a bit simplistic, but he's saying like we're having to remediate original sin. And in Taoism, again, this is simplistic because there's a lot of shit Taoism, I have to say too. But if you know, I'll let Alan have his due. You know, in Taoism, the basic assumption is that our eternal nature, that our prime nature is whole, and that we encounter our problems when we deviate from the wholeness that's already there. And that's my approach to astrology, is I'm looking at people as already whole. And I tend to find that when we allow ourselves to go with our groove, when we, like a piece of wood has a grain, when we allow ourselves to be that twisted tree that a Taoist will speak about, we tend to not only actualize, using Maslow's definition, we tend to not only actualize more quickly, but actualizing more quickly, I think, to a certain degree, leads to realization, freedom, you know, ultimate freedom from suffering more easily. So that's my approach. Is I see people as musical, and basically when I'm doing sessions, I feel as if I am, in many different ways, using many different metaphors or approaches, getting out of the way and playing their song back to them, you know, and then, you know, having whatever happens. So that's my approach with astrology. It's just a wonderful system that reflects people's innate music.
And that's beautiful. I
Yeah.
like that explanation. And I also, because something bugged me a lot about, because you explained sort of the Taoist view and then the Christian view of that. And in the Christian view, it comes from a place of kind of negativity, right? Like there's something wrong with you and you got to fix it. And I have a lot of problems with the people that talk about like life after life, or like the intermediary, like the supposed intermediary point of where you meet your council of nine and then you go through this process. And I'm like, that bugs me. Like, because it's essentially like, yeah, you put yourself into this lifetime to fix you because there's something wrong with you, and you have there's something about that always bugged me. But the way you explain the Taoist view, I'm like, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, and I can reconcile those. I think of it as a play, and if we need to have if we'll set up our, you know, our sort of, we'll have our council, and we'll be using that language if it serves us, and we'll adopt sort of this like if I was big into the Edgar Cayce readings when I was a teenager as well, and the way it's very linear and very stepwise. It's like in this incarnation they gained and lost here and there, but then it got fun. It's like, and then between incarnations they hung out in Jupiter. They spent time in Jupiter learning this. They were in Venus learning this, etc. Then they come into this incarnation. Okay, fine, Edgar. You know, they were. It was the 30s and 20s and 40s. I think Americans needed to hear it in sort of a linear kind of way. And yeah, Watts is wrong in a sense. I think I wouldn't call his view of Christianity exactly a straw man, just because that kind of Christianity has been propagated quite a bit. But you know, I would say that the mystics in the tradition, as in all traditions, tend to be coming from a place of wholeness, and tend to be experiencing that wholeness. So there are obviously there are strands of Judeo-Christianity that are, you know, very, very much coming from that Taoist angle, and there are strands of later Taoism, especially when they're getting into where they're getting into fixing people as well. So and.
Yeah, and how do you because we talked a little, you mentioned high magic. I think that's what your term was. But and I've kind of dabbled in sort of excuse me, Western ceremonial magic, which is like what is it, like high theurgic magic.
Okay, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
that's the right term, isn't it? Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
How do you define high magic and or just magic in general?
Probably loosely. I shouldn't define it. Aleister Crowley will show up and try to slap me.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
No, he wouldn't. He's like, "Good job, rebel." You know,
Yeah,
like
that's
probably,
true.
probably. Um, change that definition as much as you like. Magic to me, at least in my life experience, first there was always that kind of not out of like a fear place, but out of a respect and caring place where I'd always almost have the caveat if it's in the higher will. Because there was always instinctively in me kind of a sense that, I don't really need to be so selfishly rearranging the deck chairs for my limited purposes. There's always a sense that what I was trying to do was actually go, if I went deep enough, I could connect to a part of me that was already omniscient and deathless, and knew what time it was, knew what was up, and knew what was down. To me, for me, the basis of most of my magical experience, higher, profound or powerful magical experiences, have been times where I fall deeply into that place, and I'm sitting as deep as I can go. And so, like, a lot of manifestation has happened in my life, but again, like the most interesting manifestations, the most improbable ones that you can't really rationalize away to away to coincidence, have been times where it did not feel like there was an individual self. The individual self was there, but it had merged so deeply into that non-local, deathless, eternal, everywhere at once flavor of self, that the desire that was coming through to be manifested could not be owned by a little person, camped out a couple inches behind the forehead. That desire was coming from a come up, and when sometimes I would speak the desires out, and it was not like it was traveling from here to there. It was traveling from, kind of
Yeah.
uh, coming out. And so, in that sense, it always felt like more of a just surfing to me, like getting so out of the way that I allow the genuine desires of the individual self to be fulfilled, along the way for the ride. At other times, and then sometimes I could put the decibel out. I have no problem with sort of Westerners being, kind of like the individual, or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm not kind of a dour Protestants that Crowley was rejecting. For instance, so there's been times also when I've just been in very normal life and I was short on money, and I
Right.
would almost naughtily do a mantra that shouldn't work. Well, not a mantra, but a manifestation that shouldn't work, because for whatever reason, I would say like, Ishtar needs some cash, you know, but I would do it from depth, and it was
Yeah.
true. And I would only say that when I could feel a certain way. I could feel sort of the electricity, and then I would get an immediate phone call after Ishtar needs some cash and say, I've got a big job for you.
Wow.
It's like, I'll take it,
You're right.
and this would, and then sometimes be like, oh, remember when you loaned me that money? I'm doing well. I'm going to get it to you back. Oh, thank you. And so those things would kind of happen with some regularity. So there was always this kind of sense of presence. It's always going into presence with the kind of magic. It's almost, I could use the word miracles, and I could almost crib into the Course in Miracles, the way they're talking about it a little bit. It's an intervention. Well, an intervention from what? The higher comes into the lower. Dispense with all those things. It's yoga. It's the individuals in yoga. The yoga is the union of the Atman, the individualized soul, with Brahman, ultimately, the everything. And so, that is when those things are in deep harmony, that is the area where we can transcend so-called laws, where really weird stuff can happen, and things get all fungible.
Yes.
And so, yeah, that's the miracle for me. That's the magic zone. There's many other different sorts of magics, but that's the one I've been most drawn to.
Yeah. Yeah, great. Again, a great explanation. I like you're talking about like words and vocalization, and that's something that, excuse me, in my recent sort of practice has become very prominent. Is there's a lot of power in words. I know that's
Yes.
kind of thrown around, but it's like when you experience it and then you're like, Yeah, there's power in
There,
speaking.
one of my experiments with that, because that's always been this has been a motor of my life, the throat
Mm,
chakra, and
hmm.
always one of the more open ones in life, and I've leaned on it, maybe sometimes more heavily than I ought to in life to get through. But uh, but one thing, the experiment that I did as a teenager, because at a
Mm.
certain point I think I was telling too many fibs as a
Oh,
young teenager, and I was like, oh my God, oh, I gotta fucking remember that story. I was like, this is not good. This is
right.
not gonna, I felt like, oh God, I gotta stop this. And then it just kind of came into me like, well, you should just, tell the truth all the time. I was like, oh, really? Okay, well, let's do that. And if I really wanted to clear out and get weird, I noticed when I would do these radical honesty practices, the synchronicities would follow like rain from thunderclouds.
Wow.
So I saw there was a relationship with how honest I was. Like if I was clean as a whistle,
Hmm.
weird shit would happen. Like what by weird shit I mean is like I would be like at school and I would want something. I had wanted something. I was just someone would turn the corner and offer it to me without me asking them for it, or or someone would speak a kind word to me that had never
Mm.
done so, and I'd always wanted one from them, and they would just go out of their way and say, you know what, I've always actually really liked you, but I've never told you. And I remember that happening, and it was just like a bizarre high school film.
Yeah.
And there was a 1-to-1 correlation between how honest I could be. Later, I'm reading yoga texts, and this is of course something that's spoken on. Now, I'm not going to conflate satya, truthfulness, with honesty. There's a little bit of they're in different octaves, right?
Sure.
But I will say that if you're radically honest, it's getting into that territory where you're touching satya, truthfulness,
Hmm.
at least in my case. And they speak of, if a yogi is deeply immersed in silence, and it helps to not have a bunch of bullshit
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
happening in here. Like
Right.
you can't be juggling stories.
No.
You can't be juggling your bullshit. It's very difficult to maintain silence when you're doing all that juggling. I would know.
Right.
Um, so you drop the juggling and you just totally like you fall into silence. Well, in
Mm.
yogis, they have the power, the miracle power comes out of the throat,
Yeah.
comes out of Visuddha, the chakra of miracles. And so there's an association between how deep in silence you can be, how truthful you are, and weird synchronicities, at least in the yogic tradition. So
Wow.
that is born true in my life.
Oof. Wow. Again, another beautiful explanation of sort of the power of the throat chakra and how it
Yeah.
relates to honesty, and then juggling lies as a teenager. So it was a good early
Yeah, I tell
experience.
you, like you have to be willing to like be a fool and feel a fool.
Yeah.
If anybody who's listening, if you do a radical honesty practice, I mean, sometimes there's within reason, because you don't want to get shot.
Right.
Right? You gotta be a little practical, especially in the United States.
Yeah.
British listeners, I guess you don't want to get stabbed. You have different
There's
weapons over there.
differences. Yeah.
Differences, yeah. Um, there might be those considerations, but I will say beyond those, if you start going on being honest, you will start to uncover lies you didn't know you were telling yourself. And when those come up, that can be very embarrassing. Even if
Yeah.
nobody can see you feeling that, it's
Right.
embarrassing without an audience,
Yeah.
much less an audience. So, but if you're willing to allow yourself to be a humble fool, and kind of be like, oh fuck yeah, that is the way I felt about things for 30 years, and that is detestable, or whatever. If you're willing to go through that, my God, once you get that bilge out of there,
Hmm.
there is so much honey behind it.
Right.
So you have to persevere. If you're listening to this, you really have to persevere and be willing. And then these synchronicities can happen, because sometimes people ask me like, fucking synchronicities in my life. And I'll say, well, there could be many explanations, but often the explanation is insufficient perseverance.
Mm.
There's just there's often got to be, every practice has its own version of hours of horse dance.
Right.
I don't, I'm Saturnian, so of course I'm going to say that. So
Yeah.
I could be wrong, but almost every tradition, horse dance, and the horse dance
Hmm.
here, if read and being honest and truthful, is simply, going through the boring days when you just kind of want to vomit, or
Ugh. Wow.
having a bunch of boring, what you consider boring or thoughty meditations, even if you have a very good practice, you're
Yeah,
going to
yeah.
have meditations where, it's, oh my God, the neurotic's back. Oh no.
Right.
I thought I was had more progress. No.
Yeah. Deeper and deeper with the meditation. Well, thank you. We're kind of wrapping it up here, and to kind of tie into sort of what you're talking about with throat and radical honesty, what is a mantra or words of wisdom that you would like to leave with the audience today?
Probably words of wisdom or something. I really was thinking about this. Probably that you've always been enough.
Mhm. That's beautiful. I think a lot of people need to hear that and tell themselves that.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Ooh, yeah, that kind of hit my heart. Thank you. That was good. Uh, so where can folks find out more about you and how they could work with you?
Well, I've got a couple websites and a nascent YouTube channel, and the websites, the meditation website is www.ascension- the one in the middle, meditation.com. So ascension-meditation.com. And the astrological website is another tall drink of water. That is www.awakened with an ed lightastrology.com. So awakenedlightastrology.com. And my YouTube channel, I think the address to it is something like youtube.com/Ishtar Ishaya. I think that's one of the addresses for it. So
Cool. Thank you. Yeah. And also your wonderful Instagram, because you post really cool pictures of all your travels, and I love following it. And yeah.
that's right. Facebook and Instagram wide open. And
Yeah.
my Instagram is, I wasn't trying to be hoity-toity with the title. It's Awakened Living, because my wife and I at one point we're going to do this sort of multi-subject magazine. This was like 10 years ago. We wanted to do this with spirituality, politics, permaculture, economics. It's a very ambitious, too ambitious project. We're going to call it Awakened Living. So, it's going to be spirituality meets Mother Earth news meets something political. Anyways, that ended up as my Instagram name. So Awakened Living, or Ishtar Howell, you can look up, and that probably gets you there too. And I'm very active on Facebook as well.
Okay.
Which, I have some friends who say Facebook is a sewer. I said, yes, it is a sewer, and I enjoy it there.
Like the sewer sometimes. Yeah.
Something like something. Yeah. So I like to call them fake book and Instasham. And I don't necessarily post all spiritual content there, because I don't want to, I don't want audience capture. So if you're gone there, you're gonna get some spiritual content, you're gonna get mystical stuff and magical stuff. You're probably gonna get like me posting Queen songs, if you're going on Facebook. So get ready for some Freddie Mercury.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I'm excited now. 'Cause I always need Freddie Mercury in my life.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Ishtar, for spending time with me and chatting. It's always great spending time with you in any capacity. And yeah, just thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. Yeah, absolutely.
Your support means the world to us. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please take a moment to like, comment, and share it with others who might find this content valuable. And of course, don't forget to hit that subscribe button to stay tuned for more enlightening discussions. Your engagement helps us grow, and we appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you for being a part of the Casual Temple community.